We're going to tell you today about how your logo will not save you.
I mean, I've had clients call and that's what they ask for. Like, hey, I need a logo and a billboard. And I'm thinking, maybe those are tools. What's your name?
Well, and that is a conversation.
My name's Jason.
I think when many people they're thinking about their organization, they're like, all right, it's time for something fresh. It's time for something new. We want to reach people. And they go to the logo first. They think about the logo first and dive straight into that conversation, whether they're doing it themselves or they're talking to somebody like us to get it designed. That's what they're thinking about. Or they're thinking about the thousand of other ways that they want to get the message out. They're thinking about TikTok and billboards and social media and any number of other things that we could think of or they could think of.
Right. It's so easy to, be thinking about all the other things or see somebody else doing some cool stuff. And you're like, oh, they're writing a blog or they have a flyer or I saw their app and they're in my vertical and they do what I do and they do it like what I want to do it. And I want to do it like I need what they have. I need what they do.
And the problem is that's a fantastic way to waste a lot of time and a lot of money without reaching people.
Really quickly. You could do it fast.
Yeah.
You can waste a lot of money really fast.
You can. And what we've seen overall, because we've had an opportunity to help through the branding process now hundreds of organizations. And we've learned some things. We learned some things that trip up that process or which get it sidetracked. And we've learned some things about how to make sure that at the end of the day, it's not just wasted money. In fact, you are reaching more people than ever and connecting with them on a deeper level than others so that your actual goal, which might be to change lives, to make disciples, to grow your organization, to make a larger impact, that's what's happening out in the world.
Right. Nobody needs a website. It's not like it's not a built-in, like you need oxygen, you need food. There's no babies like, wow, I need a website. I don't, like it's a want, but what the real want is to grow. It is to increase your influence. It's to connect with more people. It's to take whatever that message or whatever that product or whatever your organization represents and get that good news, get that value that you are and what you produce out there to more people. That's what you want.
So how do you do that?
Glad you asked. That's what we're talking about today. Perfect.
In fact, we find a lot of times when we start in that process, maybe someone came in and did say, yeah, I need a new logo or I need a whole brand. And we start asking questions. And they realize that they've got to put a pause on the whole thing and back way up because the questions are, who are you? And sometimes they don't know yet. And so that's where here's a picture that you can use to kind of organize this whole process. We use this all the time, every day for everything we do. It's called a communication triangle, and it's a picture of communication.
I would say a picture of healthy communication, and the you could be you and your wife, and the them could be the teenagers who share DNA and live in your home, right? Like this what we're going to talk about today is really a general principle of communication, or this picture is that can be overlaid over any type of communication. When my wife and I have traveled and taught on communication, man, at the bottom line, when you boil all this down, it is, are we willing to think and feel like they might think and feel so that we can communicate and lead them somewhere good? We're going to talk about what is that good, what's good to us, what's good to them, who are them, and who are you? And doesn't it start right there? So I think the first step, whether we were walking you through that step or today you're watching and you're just taking notes and you want to implement it with your team, step one is you got to get clarity. Right? Go into you don't just need a new logo. You don't need a billboard. You need clarity.
Yeah. So that's step one. And we're going to take that communication triangle, by the way, and we're just going to kind of march our way through that. We're going to fill in the gaps, fill in the pieces of that. And that's what a branding process is. That's what a good branding process does. You're going to need to fill in these, whether you want to draw in a triangle or however you want to do it, you need to fill in these details. And so let's start there with that clarity, particularly around a few pieces that you'll see here. There, on the left side of that triangle, you'll see identity, as in your identity. Who are you? And what are you all about?
And honestly, right now, coming out of the pandemic, right out of 2020, the answer to sometimes those deep questions on who are you, how are you structured, what are you about? The answer has been, wow, who should we be? What should we be about? So that means like go deep there, because I know no matter what your organization, if you're watching a video like this, you want to connect with people. You want to connect deep with people. If you want to connect deeply with people, then you have to do the deep work. You can't just copy and paste somebody else's deep work over who you are. Like you have to really understand, who are you? Who should you be? Get that work done. Then who's your audience, right? That's the next question that we were going to outline.
But I mean, how do you get there? How do you get there? Because if you're leading this process, maybe you're in an organization, maybe you're the leader, or maybe you're somewhere handling communications and creative expression. One way or the other, though, in order to answer these questions, you're going to have to get that leadership team together, and they're going to have to invest some time into answering some key questions. We've got questions on our website. The discovery questionnaire is the questions we start with when we start into this branding process. And so you can download those for free. And that would give you a template to start with. If you're going to help lead your organization through a branding process, you need to make sure that you've established clarity with all the relevant leaders. This is who we are. This is how we think about ourselves. This is our mission. This is our vision. That's the why. Why do we do what we do? What exactly is it that we do? We in our minds, in our vocabulary, that's the mission is the why. The vision is the what. And then how? How do we do that? And in what manner? And so that's for us the core values. And what you're establishing there is the foundation for a healthy culture that is all aligned towards a goal.
Right. That mission, vision, value is super important. And if you're watching, you're thinking, well, I do vision is different than that. And mission is fine. You know, and you go into a bookstore, those words are synonyms, but they're interchanged all the time. For us, again, that mission is like that big one compelling dream. Why do we do what we do? That's how we use that word. But again, I've got friends who use it differently. Vision, I love thinking about it in the what. I love it when a vision outlines exactly the things we do. Right? Those are the steps. If you did these steps, you would end up headed towards the fulfillment of your mission. And then the core values, I think, Kirk, are really important, because it's how you operate. It's how you treat. It's almost intangible, but taking the time to write it down. And I think it can be a living document. In fact, I love when core values, the how you operate, end up aligning with, a catchphrase or something that of your own, that's in internal language, right? There's nothing wrong with internal language as long as it's healthy, and as long as it makes sense to everybody and is accessible to everybody. But for one of ours is gratitude is our operating system, which is a play on one. We love gratitude. Grateful for you guys watching here today and being a part of this. And please drop your questions and comments in there. We want to answer them and talk and dialogue. Or if you're watching the replay later in the online community, then please post questions in there. We'd love to dialogue with you in there. We are very grateful. And gratitude is something that we practice all the time, but is our operating system that, I know we don't need to go and teach on all the operating system of the human brain like we do sometimes, but that's a play on also that we build websites and do the thing. So that's kind of an internal fun way of saying that gratitude is a core value with us. So I love, it can be a living document, but having some core values written down, decided on with your leadership team. And then on top of those foundations, you build your structure, you build your systems. Those are the communication protocols, what happens when, so that it's not dependent on a person and it's not dependent on a personality. But now you're talking about a foundation for an organization that can scale beyond a person.
Exactly. Now you're ready to grow. And if you don't have these things in place, then I would say you need to hit pause. Because what are you inviting people into if you haven't established these things across your organization? And maybe the leader knows, but does everybody know? Does everybody know what you're about? Can they articulate it so that when you invite someone else in, do they get the same message from each person that they interact with? Is it cohesive or is it scattered? And so this is a foundation you've got to get in place before you move on from here.
Right. But then when we're talking about who we're going to communicate to, then you have to do some deep work also in discovering who is your audience. And Kirk, every one of our clients wants to reach everybody, right? Everyone in the city, in the whole world. We want to reach everyone in the universe. What would you say about narrowing the value in narrowing and defining the audience?
There's anecdotes, there's studies. You'll reach more of everybody if you get more specific with a certain somebody that you want to be very intentional about reaching. And here's the reality. I mean, if you're a church and you're in North America, there are other churches in your town. There are other churches in your city. And we can try and compete with everybody else for the same people, or we can figure out who's not being reached. Who am I called to reach? And get very specific with them. And the reason this works is the more specific you can be, the more clearly you can talk to that person. You can cut through all the other noise and figure out how you can serve them well in a way that's not being done at every other church on every other street corner.
I don't know why I'm so tickled by or feel like what you just said is innovative. I think that what's funny is that I think it sounded innovative when you basically just said, hey, if you're a church, instead of competing for what everybody else is competing with, what if you decided that who is not being, like, should this not be, like, if you're like the normal question that every church, like, who in our city is not being reached and who do we feel called out of them to build a bridge toward and build ministry to? Which now, when you're talking about a bridge, we're not talking about an actual bridge. That's a metaphor, right? You're talking about messaging, which really leads us right into what our point 2 for today, right? So you're going to get clarity, but now you're going to get the message right? Right for who? No, us speaking to them, whoever they are, but now you got to get that message right.
So this is where that specificity really helps out. And in fact, when we've worked with clients, we define personas. One or sometimes multiple personas. It's a made-up story, a made-up person with a made-up name, but we're describing that person that they want to reach. And we're trying to make them feel real so that we can then push forward into figuring out, number one, what do they care about? What are their hopes and fears? Because they don't care about you yet. They don't care about what you have to say just because you said it. They care about them. They care about the goals that they have for their life, their vision, their mission, whether or not they've articulated that. But there's some obstacles between where they're at now and where they really want to go. So that's their hopes and fears. And that, by the way, is your opportunity. That's where you have something. If you have something to offer them that falls within that realm of the things that they care about, now you have something to say to them. If you were to look at the communication triangle again, you can see this Venn diagram. There's on the right side, that's the things your audience cares about. And on the left side, that's the things that you have to offer. And in the middle, that's where you can start to craft a message from you specifically to them.
Right. And so talking about something that exists outside of their hopes in that Venn diagram is only, and you might care about it deeply, which means you could talk about it frequently. But if it's not overlapped with what they care about, then the only thing you're going to do is widen that reputation gap at the bottom, right? Because the barrier between us and them is what they've already thought about us, maybe negatively, the disconnect. There's always going to be a hurdle. We do serve a lot of churches. We serve a lot of other business, but sometimes the word church might mean something good to those of you that are watching and a lot of our clients. But to my neighbors and your neighbors, not everyone hears the word church and thinks that's good news, which is actually part of our life calling, right? Like, how can we make that sound like good news again? But when I talk about things that are relevant to me and I'm obviously excited about them, I obviously think they're important, But if you didn't, it would only create that reputation gap would only grow. It only confirm, wow, those people are irrelevant, regardless of your organization. So you've got to really build your entire messaging. You want to get your messaging right, and you've got to build it in the overlap.
So, I mean, how do you do this? How do you go about this? Let me just give you a practical outline of the steps you can take. One, I'd get real about that person that you're trying to reach. There's probably somebody that you've already reached that might be willing to sit down with you and talk through things that they care about and why did they get connected with you in the first place. You could start doing things like that. You're smart people. You can figure out people in your community, some things that they probably care about and some things that they probably don't. And so now you've got to start building some value propositions, technical marketing term, but it's not that complicated. Basically, you've got that hope or fear that your audience knows about. What can you say that connects something real that you have to offer in terms that they understand and would say, yep, that is something that I'm looking for, and start to build those out. Those value propositions, their words, their messages, you can put words to it that you can use in future conversations. It can also live out once you've figured out what those things are. They inform the things that you do. We just work with a church. They want to reach young families. They built a play center in their new building. And what are they doing? They're offering free birthday parties at this giant new play center inside. And people are coming. It's such a value and a need that people know that they have. Like, I need someplace affordable to do a birthday for my kid, and I don't know where I'm going. What? It's free? That's a value.
Right. Some friends of mine, they built a new building they were all portable campuses. Their main campus built a building. They put the words training center on the outside, and they're right down the street from a major military base. Turns out our military really likes the word training and needs space to do such. And they rent it out to them about 60 times a year. That's more than once a week. The military's using their training center. Oh, cool. Training center. We need training. We need a center for training. Can we borrow some space? Absolutely. How much space do you need? So they're renting out again, there's lots of ways to use a building or to use your ministry. But again, you're building that around who you're trying to reach and who you're trying to serve.
And so you're stair stepping. You don't have to get them all the way to your end goal for them all in one go. You start by talking about the things that they already know that they care about.
And this whole thing, Kirk, is a process. And I know our clients end up loving the process. I think sometimes though, and we fall in this trap too, where it's like, yeah, but we need the thing. We need the thing now. Can we just get the thing? Can we get it to say that what it needs to say right now? And I'm guilty of this. I was guilty of it in ministry. I'm guilty of it today. But there's a value. Fine. Get what you need. Get the stopgap. Get a solution in place. But there is such a value to the actual process. So I think if you're always in crisis mode and you're always in a stopgap, how can we fill? We just need a graphic. We just need a post. We just need a website. We just need this next thing. If you're always in that, then you're also robbing yourself of this deeper process. And it is a process. If you could go in and just kind of explain the process that we take clients through, but man, what happens next? I get clarity. I'm getting the message right. What's the next step in the process?
So that message, you can put words to it, but you're missing out on the power of human psychology if you don't go onward. And you want to, because you want that logo. And so let's press on into the visual identity here. After you get your message, you got to get visual. And this is powerful because the brain processes those abstract visual cues lightning fast before they ever read the words, before their brain has a chance to interpret those characters into ideas in their mind. They've seen colors, shapes, images, and those have hit the subconscious already framing this message in a certain context. And so it's powerful. It also creates this cohesion so that because people have to see you or your representations numerous times before it really registers in their memory. So we're working with the way that brains work. as we press into the visual space. But there's some pitfalls that we often see as people push into this area. One, people like to start here, and we've already talked about it. You can't start here. You've got to do some groundwork first. You have to figure out what is that message that you're reinforcing, because if you don't know, then you may be saying something opposite to what you really wanted. And the second thing is, your logo can't do all the work. Your logo is a representation of you, but mostly you have to fill in what that logo means with everything else that you're saying and doing. And so, do you want that logo to be nice? Do you want it to look good? Do you want it to be representative of you? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Mm-hmm. But it can't do all of that. It can't represent everything you are, and no one is going to show up to what you have to offer because you had a cool logo. It's not going to get them there.
But I need a logo and a billboard. Yeah, no. Maybe fact, those are tools. They're good tools. Eventually,
I recommend logos, maybe billboards, depending on what you're doing. So here's our recommendation: don't start with a logo in the visual process. First, do some investigation. Start with a mood board. Start with Pinterest if that's a tool you like. Gather things that you feel like represent the kind of feel that your message needs to have to reach your audience.
And that doesn't just mean other competitors. Like if you're a church, doesn't mean all the other churches that you like. I mean, there could be other churches that you might like, but it could also be restaurants, or it could be the kinds of grocery stores, or the feels of a theme park. It could be literally anything on the internet that says this is the kind of feel I'm going for.
Right. So you can even just images. Like maybe you've decided our brand needs to feel like fresh air. Okay, there might be landscape photos that you're just pulling in. Yeah, it needs to feel like I feel when I look at this image. And you want to gather that together. You want to get whoever your stakeholders are to look at that together with you and kind of decide, yeah, this fits and that doesn't, because it's okay to just grab whatever you see and get a bunch and then contract it down later as you collaborate with others who are working on this with you. Once you've done that, start with what's clear. Again, you don't have to jump all the way to logo. Logo is the hard part here. So why not start with a color palette? Yeah, if you can figure out these colors feel right, these textures feel right, these fonts that we've explored, we like the way that once you start nailing in those pieces, now you're actually making steps closer to that logo that you also want to go with it to kind of be the centerpiece of this much larger project of this visual brand that can be a cohesive representation of your message with or without words.
Yeah, and then try it out, right? And test it out.
Yeah, don't try it out with that audience that you've been trying to reach. Does it connect with them? Did they like it? Because that's more important, by the way, than if you like it. This is for them. This is for that audience you're trying to reach. And that may mean that it resonates less with some members of your organization itself than it does for them. And if you can make something that resonates with them even better, that's the goal.
I love this process, Kirk, because I think it answers that question. What, I want to. You want to actually engage with people. So I know if you jump right to visual identity, right? Like I've had friends that have messaged me and said, "Hey, you're in this arena. Like, I just got a new color palette. Can I send it to you?" And I was like, I don't know anything about what you're doing or who you're trying to reach. And they're like, "Well, no, just let me send it to you. Tell me if they're good colors." And I was like, I like all colors. I don't, I will just say it looks good. Now it depends on who you are, who you're trying to reach, and what your message is. Does that color palette communicate that message? So again, from the top, like we got to get clear on who we are and who we're trying to reach. And then we got to get that message right. And then absolutely get visual. But now, once we're visual, now let's go digital.
Let's get digital. you're going to want a website. I'm just going to say that.
Shocking. Again, you are so full of these like revolutionary ideas. The church should target people who don't go to church, and you need a website. That's what you learned today.
Which is one of the other things that people come in from the get-go and say, I need a website. And yeah, oftentimes, yes, they do. They need a website or a new website. It's true. But to get to an effective website, again, you have to have all of this other things in place. Because what is that website? It's a tool for taking this message and getting it out there to your audience. And so, you're gonna have to establish that clarity, that message, that visual, so that you can then move on to taking that into this platform. And so it needs to be a representative of your brand. But if we can break it down, a website, I think there's a lot that goes into it, and it's not just development. It's not just cool features or functionalities. Those are maybe critical or maybe not. Because first you have to establish a strategy. You need to go into it understanding what is it that this website needs to do and what does it not need to do.
And I would just say even the deeper parts where we started already about the clarity that plays right into the strategy is if your organizational structure and your internal systems are a mess, it's really going to be hard to communicate who you are in a cohesive, non-messy way. Because why? You're a mess. Who reports to who, and what do you want for people when they engage with you? I'm not even talking about just online, but just in general. Is there a process for people? Is there a thing? Do things make sense? It's hard to make them make sense on a web page if they don't make sense for you on the ground over a cup of coffee.
Absolutely.
So start strategy. Start with strategy.
Start with that strategy. And here's a critical component I want you to understand about that strategy is you build a website and you think this website's about us. It's our website. It's not. It's not about you. It's about the person you're trying to reach. And so there are a whole lot of websites out there that tell you everything you ever didn't want to know about this organization and how it started and why. But if it doesn't connect to the known hopes and fears of that audience person, that persona, then you've missed it. Because why are they there? Why are they there? And so part of that strategy is figuring out what is this person coming to the site for? And how do we help them find it without confusing them, without overloading them, without them getting lost in the navigation? How do we make sure that when they land on that page, they know this is what this has for me? This is why I'm going to keep scrolling this page and not immediately jump to something else. And so that leads to the content, of course. Content is a big project, friends. If you want to create a new website, I need you to understand it's going to take a lot of time writing the content on the website. That is the substance of this site. And if you haven't thought through the content, it could look great, but is it going to accomplish what you needed it to do? And so know that that process alone is going to take a good amount of your attention and a good amount of time to write the content that you need so that you're expressing your message in those words on the site.
The strategy and the content come first. And that is the deep end of the pool. That is the heavy lifting. I always know what I want to say until I try to write it down. And so you're going to face that same mountain. But it's worth it if you do it and can do it well, and that's, in fact, even with that, and honestly, the growth of our entire team as we built our team, a lot of it has grown around, and especially in the last couple of years, around writing and creating an entire writing team. Why? Because that's what it takes. That's what our clients needed to actually create the things that worked.
Earlier on in the life of ArtSpeak, when we were doing a website, just the pattern every single time was, let's do a website. And so we'd talk about the strategy, do discovery, we'd do the designs, mock-ups of pages, and we'd do the development and get all ready. And then we'd wait for the content to come in from that organization, and it would often take 4, 5, 6, 7 months or more to get that content written so that we could actually finish the site. It takes a long time.
Well, and that's why we ended up creating a content writing team to help with that. And then sometimes when we're asked, the content team is asking deep questions about who are you and what's your structure and what's your systems. They're like, that's why we developed an entire consultation team to help wrestle through some of that deep work with our clients so that they could end up with a very creative, also very authentic, very clear representation of who they are. Now, when you can get simple and you can get clear and you can communicate that well, man, it resonates deeply with people and you end up reaching more people. So functionality, I love the last point. I think we put it up there a second ago on strategy, content, design, functionality, lots that I know you could teach us on functionality, Kirk, but that last one there, user experience. You just mentioned a second ago, your website isn't for you. It's not for your board of directors or your board of overseers or however you're organized. It's not for your staff. I mean, their staff could use it. Hopefully the pages that are for your staff are actually navigatable and resourceful for them, but it's for the user. It's for whoever the website is being used by. That's what you should design the website for.
Exactly. Clarity is better than cool.
Clarity is better than cool.
Yes, make it cool, but not at the cost of clarity. If the user is frustrated and confused, you've lost them. And so
get clear, get the message right. Then we're going to get visual, we're going to get digital, and then reach people. Right now, it's time to take that entire message and let as many people connect with that website, connect with that messaging as possible.
And so, you've created the message, you've created the website. That's a platform that's going to help you get there, help you get that message out. But the people are still out there and you're over here. And so how do you get in front of them? And there are so many ways. We don't need to talk about all the different ways that you could be out there, but you do need to figure out, where are your audience right now? Where are they? Where are they spending time? And how can you become part of that community, that culture, that environment in a way that's not an interruption? It's not a pop-up ad that comes in and speaks value to them and then brings on a journey. And so the second point there is build funnels. Don't just scattershot your message out there and hope someone, takes the initiative to figure out who you are and why you sent them a message. Build funnels that take people one step at a time, adding value to them the whole way through. And we've got whole other webinars recorded that talk exactly on how to do that. But what we're saying is this: you continue to add value to those hopes and fears that the audience has.
Yeah, and then be consistent with this. This is kind of like how to be a good human 101. Be consistent, have conversations, or be consistent and build relationships. When our sales team, we don't even call it that, but like the number one goal, if I was sending one of our team members to come visit you or to go to a conference, it's to build friendships, build relationships. Right. And online, we're looking at engagement. What does that look like? Likes and comments and shares. And, so comment back and engage, build conversations, whether that's digitally or in your neighborhood. Don't just build a cool building for the military or for young families. Talk to young families. I know this sounds like this is the revolution that we're trying to start here, is basic human 101 behavior. It's super innovative. Care enough about those that you're trying to reach to understand who they are, what they think and feel, what they might be going through, to build cool stuff for them, and then get in conversations with them.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this phrase that go into all the world and preach good news. Bring good news to the world around you. Use the tools that our culture and the modern world have provided, but do it with intentionality. Do it in a way that allows you as an organization to bring a message that sounds like, feels like, is received as good news on the other end, and draw them into a healthy place where you have something for them.
So here's the 4 things that ArtSpeak does. We've kind of covered these in this as we do consulting, branding, websites, and then ongoing creative marketing support. But this isn't a sales pitch. I want to get to our Q&A. Or if I hope you're gaining enough value by all the things that we've been posting and connecting, and we're just trying to give away everything that we've learned in art as we've served clients like you. And if you want to do it yourself, then please, you can go on the website today, artspeakcreative.com. You can download step number 1 about our questionnaire. Our branding questionnaire is the first step. It's the homework that we send out to any of our clients. You can have it. You can start filling it out today. You can ask some of those deeper questions, but start there. Do the deep work. Do the hard work of figuring out, of getting clarity, right? That's where it starts. Whether you had hired us or not, then get clarity, right? And then get your message right. Work hard at learning about who you're speaking to, whether you've got a message to give verbally or a website to build, but then turn it into a visual identity, get digital. And there's so many great pathways for that. And then reach people by overcoming that reputation gap, by creating a message that speaks to your audience, speaks to their hopes, speaks to their dreams, understands their fears, and proclaims that good news. So we may have some questions already in the channel here. We want to maybe address some of those. Those words are way too small for
can't see them
for nearly half a century eyeballs.
Let's see here. I'll pull this.
Is there no moderator that can jump in and help us? Okay, we're getting this. We'll get it.
Okay, top question. That's a good one.
So
How can I help my
one.
boss realize we need to rebrand?
You could just play him this video. I love leading up. I think there's a lot to that. I think sometimes in a structure we feel like we can't bring vision up, and I think that's I think you have. Okay, you're you. Your boss is them in your question here, right? So you've got to think through, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What do they desire? So if you bring it, you're not to say, hey, you know what? I watched a cool video, or all the other cool organizations in our area are doing it this way. That's not going to speak to them. You got to speak to your boss's hopes, your boss's dreams, and say, hey, this is a foundational piece to really making sure your dreams, I see you leading us in this direction. And I think we need something like this to help us get there. That's vision. You can bring it up. And then here's an option, or here. I love bringing options up, right? Do you want A or do you want B? Oh, you don't want A or B? Okay, fine. How about C or D? And what we're outlining here is like, hey, download our resources. You can do it yourself. Or if you're saying, hey, we need to hire a company, obviously there's budgeting issues. But even with budgeting issues, usually it's just a matter of time and priority. So you're saying, hey, when does it make sense for us to get a meeting on the calendar to talk about setting the platform for the next 5 to 10 years, rather than just always last minute?
And depending on your context, there may be a barrier that you need to overcome there of, it's marketing. We don't need marketing, which is still a bad word in some circles of organizations and churches especially. And maybe if you can then put this in other terms, this is about clarity, this is about direction, this is about making the good news understandable for the people we're called to reach. Maybe that helps.
This is another one very similar. What do you do when you're going through the deep work and the leaders keep coming up with cliches? Cliches, I guess, are cliches because they're true at some level. So there's some of that. Boy, that's a good one. I think most of the time when the cliches have bothered me most, it's when it's a thought terminating moment, right? When we're having a great, like, hey, we have got to really decide on this new big thing and we want to get the messaging right. And then it's usually like cliche, done. We already finished that, and because we got to get on to the next. So timing is usually like it's trying to hurry up the conversation. So what we do internally in our team is a series of expansion and contraction. So I would just, okay, let's write up all the ideas. Let's get all. So somebody can have a cliche. Okay, cool. What's the next one? What's the next one? There's no bad ideas. Give me all the cliches. laugh about it. Oh yeah, I've heard that one. Welcome home. So that's the popular one right now. So, what are all of the cliches? What are all of the ideas? Get them all on a board. And then you can even have a different session where you're like, okay, I'll package this up. If your job is to, as a creative or as a executive, as your job is to compile, there is a lot of, I don't know, I'm making the nefarious gesture with my fingers, but there's a lot of power in the editor to say, hey, here, I grouped our ideas. I grouped our buckets together. What do you guys think here? What resonates here? What now? Here's how I've grouped them. What do you think? And then as you come back to them. So I would just push beyond letting the cliche end the meeting. We're not done just because we had a zinger that somebody else used once. Great. Maybe that cliche sticks. Maybe at the end of the day, that's the one. Like, it could describe who you are. How would we say it? How else would we say it? And keep the expansion part of the conversation open. Don't let a cliche be like expansion is no. Then you edit and later you can track down. And then you have to revisit those groupings.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. And speaking of strategy here, do we help with churches redefine their vision, mission statement, core values, along with branding?
Do we?
Yes,
all the time. And, I think part of that question is said, what happens when the mission statement and logo no longer have any meaning to their congregation community? Like, yes, that happens all the time. I think you have to, when you're dealing with symbols that communicate or were created, and I think we've had the privilege of coming alongside almost every flavor of Christianity in North America, which I'm so grateful for that, because we've got a lot of friends pointing a lot of their friends, I think, to Jesus at the center. So, and also some very, very compelling nonprofits, and even some really great and compelling for-profits that we've been able to help. Everybody runs into this, where the symbol to the next, to the new, or to the new target audience, or to those that they now are very well equipped to reach, no longer communicates to those people what it did 50 years ago or 500 years ago or however long ago it was created. So I think but you do have to handle that carefully, right? Because that might mean something deeply to a few. So then that's where the deep work of explaining and understanding with empathy. So that triangle, right, of us, we know who we are, them, when you go to roll out some of this new stuff, there may be some of our internal team, and then that demographic, and then that demographic. So that audience, hopefully you stay who you are, but the audience might change, which means you might also have to do some empathy towards different people groups.
Yeah. Someone asked about the reputation gap, which is a great question. Yes, that reputation gap. I think every time you do this, it's twofold. One, there's the actual, what do they think about you? You need to answer that question, but you also need to answer the categorical question. Like, what do they think about everyone in your category? If you're church, what do they think about church in general? If you're a dentist, what do they think about dentists? You need to understand what's there. And how do you figure that out? You can't. We sometimes do online surveys, anonymous online surveys for the area. You can ask people. Oftentimes, if you're a church, you can talk to the people that are at your church, and you can talk to them about what drew them to your church and why they're still there, what they appreciate about that. You can also ask, what do people say when they try to invite their friends? And you might be able to dig into what's working and what's not and why with some sit down conversations.
One of our creatives just on her own, I think 2 summers ago, was just frequenting a cafe and decided to ask the barista if she could interview her. And the results from those conversations of what do you think about the church and the kingdom, and who are you and what's your background? So I think you could also find people in your community that might look like those that you would love to see be a part of what you're doing, and then ask them. But please, that's a moment to just listen. You're just learning. Mm-hmm. You might build a really great friendship out of that, and that could continue on from there. But that is a moment not to be defensive. You can't ask a question and then be defensive about it. Well, I can. I'm pretty good at it, but but it does create offense almost every single time. So I would just say that's not a moment to be defensive. It's just a moment to ask, oh man, tell me more about that, or where do you think that came from, or what's going on. So a great practice too, by the way. Please do this. Whether you're going through a rebrand or not, like, talk to people that you would like to connect with in your community. Find out, you'll find out what they hope for, what they dream of. I'm talking about talk, like real conversations, not those aren't even online in my mind, because that's just can be echo chambers and, hey, what does so-and-so think about this? Or what are these kind of people like? You're not getting the one-on-one honest answer from somebody who feels like they're in a safe space.
Makes me think about Steve Pike and Next Wave book talking about the redemptive conversations, which basically just building relationships out in the community.
That's a book we published, Next Wave .community. If you want to check it out, we're having conversations like this every single week, multiple times a week. And I would love to have you a part of those. There's another couple questions here, Kirk. Two of them, maybe they go together. Is it smart to rebrand without a strong creative team? Man, I want it. The salesman in me wants to say, no, you need to hire us. But I think that would be cringy. So I'm not going to say that. Thinking out loud, I'm saying that's my inside voice. But I think you could. I mean, again, you can start with the questions, figure out where the hurdles are, work a process. I would definitely recommend download. We have lots of other webinars, lots of other downloadable resources that you could follow along with. When it goes to creating that visual identity that looks and feels like you, which I think takes it. One of the other questions said, man, if another church has great color palette and a great logo and a great name, the church world is not immune from lawsuits over logos. Okay. Or names or words or colors. So I would just be very, very careful with grabbing someone and just, we loved your name and your logo and your colors. And they're like, well, those are ours. And now you're confusing. Well, we're on different parts of the country and we speak a different language. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. They could still come after you. Whether they'd win or not, would have to fight it in court, and that's going to get expensive. So you might want to differentiate a little bit. The question though reminds me of one time when a client said, well, I looked through all of your clients and there really wasn't anything that resonated with us that we want to look like. And my answer was, okay, because those were them. We want to design. This is our differentiator, really. One of them is that we want to design as you and not for you, which is why we're talking about this today, about going deep and get the messaging right and start with clarity. Go swim in the deep end of the pool first, because then you want an authentic, creative representation of you. You're unique. So is everyone else. But you're unique. You have a calling in your community, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit. You have an opportunity to articulate who you are well, if it can be creative. So yeah, you might need some creative lifting for that. That's why we are who we are. That's why we love doing what we do. Go ahead.
Join our community.
Absolutely.
And that as you go through this process on your own, at whatever scale you're able to do it, we'd love to give feedback. We'd love to give recommendations and resources as you go along. We can help support you because it all scales to wherever you're at.
You can post a feedback in there. You can be a part of ongoing conversations with weekly training. So that's artspeakcreative.community. Is that the right domain?
Community.artspeakcreative.com.
I almost had it right. Community.artspeakcreative.com. So how do I figure out who we should try to reach?
That's a great question. I love it.
That. I love
the missionary
that
in me loves that question. I think there's several approaches you can take, and that you should do all of them. In fact, I think sometimes you look at you feel this heart for a certain kind of person. Don't ignore that. That's important. There's probably people that you are well suited to reach for whatever reason. Maybe you have a building with a 5-story kids play place. Well, reach some kids with that, all right? But then please look around your city, your town, your community, whatever it is, and identify the people that aren't being reached. Don't compete. Let's find people that need to be reached, and reach out to them. So you're going to have to put those factors together. There's no one thing that trumps the others. But
as somebody who didn't grow up with a church experience, I'm a big advocate for targeting and building conversations and ministry, user experience, both on the website and in any gathering, around the mindset of somebody who might be there for the first time, or build your ministry on. Target those. I remember we did some Easter outreach stuff on a Sunday. And we had our feedback when we were planting a church together. Our feedback was, but we already have a church, so we can't come to your Easter thing. And I was like, great. Our thing is for those who don't already have church. And so do stuff for those. That would be my admonition there. But that would also be for, like, in the for-profit world. I was just watching a video yesterday with Mr. Beast, who's got just a phenomenal following online, and he just launched a candy bar company because the candy bar company was boring and his target audience didn't want boring anymore. So he launched some candy. He said that next year they'll break 250 million in sales because nobody's changed the Hershey bar for 100 years. So he's like, it was kind of boring. My audience wanted something not boring. So we made some not boring chocolate, and it's taken off. So again, find the person, the people, the demographic, the opportunity that needs a connection, and who you feel compelled to connect with.
The questions keep coming in here.
Is clever never good? Is that referring to the cool factor that we mentioned a minute ago?
I think clever I would say it's overrated. There are opportunities where clever presents itself and it can work. But if you're shooting for clever, you're shooting for the wrong target. Shoot for effective. Shoot for what works, that communicates clearly. And if cleverness pops in, if there's an opportunity, see if it works. That's my take.
Yeah, that's good. Man, yeah, we have time for a few more of these too. What are some of the unexpected costs of a rebrand as a church of a smaller to medium size? I've got a couple thoughts on that. Another person said, I like don't compete, but I feel like the other churches are trying to compete with us. What do we do? What is that? Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So compliment received. Is what I would say. Once you identify your audience, your mission, vision, values, what are some of the hardest parts of the branding process? Where can we go wrong? So I think some of those overlap there.
Yeah. I think the stakes, as an organization begins to realize the value of this process and the clarity that it brings, it raises the stakes. Like if you go into this process thinking, oh yeah, I think we need a new logo. It's probably time for a new logo. And then you're like, okay, well, let's get clear on some things. Like, oh yeah, this is important stuff. We really do need to get clear on, who is it we're trying to reach, and what is our mission and vision, value, and how does that help us inform decisions? Well, as the stakes keep raising, then sometimes the process can slow down as you're like, oh, we really need to think about this. And so it becomes critical to create effective collaboration and feedback processes so that you're successfully gathering the voices that you need to hear from and giving them that opportunity to speak into it, and then successfully contracting that down to a decision point to move on. And so I think if you are kind of trying to help lead through this process, you need to kind of plan this out, create a project. We use project management software called Asana. And you can kind of create these milestones and say, hey, we're going to get to this point, and then we're all going to decide this is it. That we decided on this part of it so that we can move on. Because if it's forever open to go back and revisit, you will never finish. You'll never get on to these later stages.
And the later stages can honestly be more fun because it's starting to apply the brand. And then honestly, the people that might be the greatest skeptic and want to always go back and tweak things, once they get to those later stages, like, well, this is great. This is working. So I do think, setting up those milestones and creating an actual process where everyone approved. And so if you have key decision makers that are going to want to have final approval, then the best you can, you've got to involve them with the process and get you already approved this here and this here and this here. So now we're on to this. This was the final draft. And they might say, well, that final draft, I want to tweak it one more time. Great. And we've had clients that were like that. We've had friends that are like that. So we understand that, we get that final approval. Now we move on to the next phase. And so I think when, the question about what's some of the unexpected costs of doing a full rebrand is sometimes doing the deep work, you realize some inefficiencies. You realize some truths about your organization that maybe, oh man, we want to connect more with this certain demographic. And then, so you start creating messaging around that, but the messaging around that might be different than what you're actually doing. And you can then you could keep going, man, we're going to build this whole thing. And all you have done is then create an aspirational brand. This is what we would desire to look like. This is what we would desire to be. Why? Because the thems really love this. The unexpected cost would be, are we willing to change the way we do things? So I'm thinking that the images in my mind are churches that are saying, am I willing to do the things that make what I experience on a Sunday or a Wednesday or in our small groups actually for them? Or am I just trying to market to them? Am I just trying to look cool for them? And I think that could be an unexpected cost, is if you create a gap between what you're promising in your brand and what your brand can actually deliver, that is going to create frustration for everybody, right? For those that love it and say, that's not us. And then those who want that show up and they're like, that's not them. You might lose both audiences. So this isn't something just to, again, we don't just need a cool new logo. We just don't need to copy what another church does. You really need to wrestle, especially the smaller and medium-sized churches, need to wrestle with, okay, who are we? Why are we? Are we structured for that? Do we have systems for those people? Do we have resources for them? Again, that's why we say start there. And that's structure and systems. That isn't about, to me, it's all marketing. It's all what you're bringing to your market. But it's about how you interact with people when they say hi. And they walk in the door, or they come to the cash register and they're ready to buy, or they want to check out. Are you able to deliver the promise? Here's business 101. Make a promise, fulfill a promise. Branding is going to say, let's get really good at making these promises to these people. The unexpected cost can be, can we deliver that promise?
Yeah. I think that's good. There's other costs that you can run too. Obviously, when you do a rebrand, signage, and all you start thinking about all the places where your current brand is and now needs to be replaced.
I've stood on the streets of Dallas and I was told, you can have every part of our brand, all of our messaging, all of our colors. You're not allowed to change our logo, because then I would have to change that sign 4 stories up. And if I change that sign, it's going to cost me over $1 million. So please don't change the logo. So we're like, okay, logo, keep the logo, add more colors, get the messaging right, get all of that. So
we're coming up on 2:30, and I think we've covered all the questions.
So here. Good. But hey, keep them coming. We're going to drop this into community.artspeakcreative.com. Drop your questions in there, message us in there. If you're a part of that community, you also get access to our Slack, to some Slack channels that we'd love to engage with you in there about your work, about this work, however we can help you. Go download the questionnaire today, artspeakcreative.com. There's a branding questionnaire for you.
Awesome.
Go and reach people.